Chapter 2259, Affection 2. This little expression of pity immediately made Nangong Luyun very happy. He leaned over and pecked her lips, like a dragonfly gently touching the surface of the water. A warm and soft, incredibly compassionate gesture. Is it time for you to leave? Su Luo's eyebrows furrowed deeply. Sometimes she hated herself for being so smart. She could see a clue from Nangong Luyun's refusal to answer, on top of the fact that her sixth sense has always been accurate. You miss me that much? Nangong Luyun gave a quirky smile as he pinched Su Luo's white and tender cheeks. Earlier, he was out on a mission with the group. After receiving Su Luo's call, he was so scared that his heart had almost stopped beating. At that time, he did a slight trick to get away from the squad before darting off to Su Luo's rescue. It was a good thing that the black communication amulet he gave Su Luo was imbued with a special power that he had set up to accurately locate Su Luo's position. Facing Nangong Luyun's teasing, Su Luo snorted and turned her head away. Okay. I'm the one that misses you. I miss you, all right. Nangong Luyun turned Su Luo's face back with his charm. This man, who was so powerful and domineering to the point of decimating the Eighth Elder in such a profoundly cruel manner, and appeared mysterious, cool, and heartless in the eyes of outsiders, was now so good-natured and temperamental in front of Su Luo. He was completely subservient to her, obliging her every whim, and treating her with tender, loving care. You're the one who missed me. I didn't miss you. Su Luo got a bargain and still continued to act like an obedient little kid. Nangong Luyun chuckled repeatedly, but couldn't do anything but rub her head in helplessness. You have suffered these days. Nangong Luyun gazed deeply into Su Luo's eyes, as incomparable pity gleamed within his own. In such a short period of time, she had raised her cultivation to 2-star saint rank. The promotion speed was so fast that he could hardly believe what he saw. That's because I don't have you by my side. Su Luo smiled wistfully. In other words, I don't need you at all? Nangong Luyun didn't like to hear these words. He poked Su Luo's cheek. If you don't need me, then the one in the bottle now wouldn't be the soul of the Eighth Elder. Huh? Su Luo stuck out her tongue and immediately gave a pragmatic reply. I see that you are still useful. Nangong Luyun was exasperated by her reply, and at once he pressed Su Luo back into his arms in a domineering fashion. This girl was really stubborn. She needed to be taught a hard way. Just when Nangong Luyun was about to take advantage of her once again, Su Luo covered his lips with her hands and sneered twice. My little nine-tailed silver fox hasn't been saved yet. Nangong Luyun pulled Su Luo in, begging and pleading. But I'm about to leave. Then you should save my little silver fox quickly. I can't do it alone. Su Luo replied with a serious expression on her face. Nangong Luyun grumbled. Isn't it just a little silver fox? I'll catch 10 or 8 of them for you later. Okay. I could use the time to save it to catch a lot of them for you. No. Su Luo was extremely determined. It is my little friend, my family, who had died to save me. Fine. I'm afraid of you. Seeing how serious Su Luo was, Nangong Luyun instantly waved the white flag. Originally, he wanted to have a tender moment with Su Luo, but this little silver fox, darn it. However, your silver fox can't be saved, Nangong Luyun said slowly, while pulling Su Luo as he walked. Su Luo instantly froze up before snapping her head up. Didn't you just say? Chapter 2260, Affection 3. What exactly do you mean? Su Luo frowned. Don't you still have your little purple sable? The so-called concept of soul coalescence is to combine these two pets into a new spirit pet, which will inherit both of the pet's abilities. Nangong Luyun stared at Su Luo without blinking. Su Luo took a step backward. Isn't there any other way? No. Nangong Luyun shook his head. Seeing Su Luo's hesitation, Nangong Luyun sighed again and rubbed the top of her head. This could turn out to be a good thing, not only for the little silver fox, but also for the little purple sable. How is this possible? Of course, you see, the little silver fox would gain a heart, and after the soul coalescence, the little purple sable would have a great chance of becoming stronger and obtaining higher qualifications. Wouldn't this be good for both of them? Nangong Luyun said as a matter of factly. Su Luo still hesitated. Although she would save the little silver fox, she was afraid that she would wrong the little purple sable. At this time, the little purple sable was lounging on Su Luo's shoulders, its furry tail wrapped around Su Luo's neck like a warm scarf. I am willing to do it. The little purple sable looked at Su Luo for a moment, nodding solemnly. Are you really? Don't force yourself. Su Luo confirmed again. I really want to. The little purple sable said in earnest to Su Luo, Master, you will go to the spirit world in the future, right? I don't want to be left behind. The little purple sable knew very well that Su Luo would be continuously promoted and strengthened as she went on, and she would enter even bigger spiritual realms in the future. But if she was forced to stay on this continent because of her limited qualifications, she would really regret it until the day she died. Although the little purple sable didn't say anything, Su Luo understood the meaning behind its dark eyes. If the little silver fox were awake, he would make the same choice. The little purple sable looked at Su Luo quietly. Under the gaze of the little purple sable, Su Luo finally relented. She turned to look at Nangong Luyun. Do you mean to merge the little silver fox and the little purple sable into a new pet? Then would their original selves still be there? Su Luo asked, full of anxiety. All previous consciousness will be retained. Nangong Luyun nodded seriously. Then okay. Su Luo grabbed Nangong Luyun's hand. You have to promise. You must succeed. Nangong Luyun pinched her cheek with a wry smile. When had there ever been a 100% guaranteed success rate in this world? But since he agreed to Su Luo, Nangong Luyun would do his best and not make his little girl sad. Nangong Luyun led Su Luo into the deepest part of the underground magma. Surrounded by flames on all sides, it was a fiery red world. Su Luo looked around and sighed. This is like the place where we were trapped by the fallen red lotus in the secret dragon territory. Nangong Luyun smiled. Those were unforgettable and beautiful memories. At this moment, Nangong Luyun's eyes shifted slightly. What's wrong? Su Luo suddenly had a bad premonition. Nangong Luyun shook his head. Is it that the people from your team came over? Su Luo saw the discomfort in Nangong Luyun's complexion, so she made a bold guess. A girl who is too smart is not easy to deceive. Nangong Luyun sighed. It isn't hard to guess. Apart from the thorn, who else in this world can make you frown? Su Luo said casually. Chapter 2261. Affection for you. Nangong Luyun glared at Su Luo sullenly. You little girl are just used to attracting bees and butterflies while your beloved here is the one who has to worry the most. Hey, Su Luo was so angry that she wanted to beat him. Okay, no time to waste. Nangong Luyun smiled and held her hand, gave her a fierce kiss, and then walked into the fiery red world, holding the little silver fox and the little purple sable in his arms. You guard the outside, and make sure not to let anyone disturb me, Nangong Luyun instructed. Su Luo nodded her head. Then, she could only stare at Nangong Luyun's retreating back. Time passed by minute, second by second. Outside, Su Luo paced back and forth, her mind gradually calming down from the initial excitement. But then, she became restless again because even Nangong Luyun himself didn't know when those people from his team would come over. And there was still Fairy Wu Yu. Who knew when Fairy Wu Yu could find this place with a sudden stroke of luck? There were all kinds of coincidences in this fire dragon cave. But what made Su Luo rejoice was that her luck was astounding at that moment, as if the heavens were taking care of her. Even after an hour, they were still alone and no one appeared. Then, Nangong Luyun strolled out, carrying a little something purple and white. At this time, the little thing was fast asleep, his belly puffing, and his breathing light, but with long drawn-out breaths. Su Luo carefully took the little creature from Nangong Luyun, and while watching it carefully, she nodded in satisfaction. This little thing has been reborn after the soul coalescence. In terms of appearance, it had inherited all the advantages of the nine-tailed silver fox and the little purple sable, with long and thick eyelashes, a small and handsome nose, and small lips like cherry blossom petals, which looked extremely cute. "You can give it a name," Nangong Luyun said with a smile. "Then how about we call it Little Fox Sable?" Su Luo looked up at Nangong Luyun. Upon seeing him, she froze in surprise. At this moment, his face was a little bit paler than before, and even his complexion was drained, which would distress anybody who saw him. "Are there any problems?" Su Luo asked with concern. "Of course there are problems." Nangong Luyun glared at Su Luo fiercely. "Su Luo, are you leaving now?" Nangong Luyun looked at his communication amulet. As the leader, he could locate the whereabouts of each team member. At that moment, those people were coming over there. At this time, it was still impossible for Nangong Luyun to expose Su Luo. Nangong Luyun's arms circled around her, and he squeezed Su Luo into his embrace and took in a deep inhale of the fragrance of her hair. His voice was deep and serious. "My girl, things on the thorn side are not easy to deal with. Next time I have a chance, I'll fill you in with the details, okay? You can explain it in detail next time, but you can still explain it briefly right now." Su Luo hated it most when others treated her as ignorant and hid everything from her. Simply put, Nangong Luyun considered his wording. Now the Thorn's leader is a woman. Huh. Su Luo was shocked. Wasn't that the boss that had once liked her mother? And how did a beast with such strength turn into a woman? Nangong Luyun stroked Su Luo's ink-like hair with pity, his eyes full of sympathy. "You really have a good mother. However, your mother attracted all kinds of bees and butterflies, then went up and left behind a mess of hatred for you to bear." Chapter 2262, Affection 5. Su Luo's eyes were spinning, and she asked in her heart, this couldn't be another affair of love, could it? Nangong Luyun couldn't help but sigh. The Thorn's original leader has disappeared already, and the current leader is his junior sister. Originally, he and his junior sister were engaged, but then he saw your mother. Su Luo was going blind from all of this contrived gossip. "My mother definitely wouldn't incite him." Su Luo defended her mother. "Of course, your mother and my teacher." Nangong Luyun paused and sighed faintly. After just a single glimpse of Yanhua, they were smitten for the rest of their lives. Isn't there a saying that goes something like that? Your mother's existence in itself is a kind of incitement. Su Luo. Nangong Luyun patted Su Luo's hand. He'd also experienced that kind of pain of being unable to get what one most wanted before, so he could understand her, but he was still much luckier than those glorified ancestors. Su Luo recollected herself. "So the problem now is that the Thorn's original leader, who like my mother, has disappeared, and the current leader is his junior sister?" Nangong Luyun nodded. Su Luo continued. "The Thorn's current leader bitterly hates my mother, and my mother left after kicking her. But so now she has turned all her hatred on me?" Nangong Luyun helplessly nodded again. Su Luo placed her hand to her forehead. "What kind of sin had I committed? Having to carry a previous generation's worth of hatred even in the best of times, and that hatred could never be rid of by any means. Willing to help but unable to." Nangong Luyun could only pat Su Luo's slender shoulders in sympathy. He knew very well how formidable the Thorn was. That Empress' true strength was unfathomable, and he was far from a match for her at his current strength. Her existence strongly threatened Su Luo's life. For Nangong Luyun, it was clear what he ought to do. Nangong Luyun's black communication amulet rang once again. This was their signal that they had to part ways. Su Luo looked at him, reluctant to leave, and Nangong Luyun embraced her, full of affection. The two held each other tightly, almost squeezing the other's breath out of their lungs. The communication amulet flashed urgently. "Time for me to go." Nangong Luyun rubbed her head. Su Luo replied, feeling depressed. "Remember to think of me every day." Nangong Luyun delicately ordered. "Okay." Su Luo bit her lip. "Remember to watch out for yourself." Nangong gazed at her. "Just wait until those matters are finished. Then we'll never have to be separated again." "Okay." Su Luo grew even more reluctant to see him go. Nangong Lian looked at the symbol on the communication amulet. Those groups of small black dots were getting closer and closer. He couldn't let Su Luo be exposed right now. So, taking a deep breath, he resolutely pushed Su Luo away and strode off. Looking at Nangong Liyun's handsome receding figure, Su Luo's eyes couldn't help but become moist. A long farewell, and a short reunion, not knowing when they would next see each other. Thinking about the Thorn's leader, the Empress, Su Luo couldn't help but feel worried for Nangong Liyun. If it weren't for Purgatory City, the Thorn could definitely be ranked number 1 on the continent. Although it was inferior to Purgatory City in many aspects, it wasn't by much. Being hated by the Thorn's leader, Su Luo felt sad and helpless. Nangong Liyun's supposed score to settle with the Thorn. It couldn't be to assassinate the Empress, right? Chapter 2263, Affection 6. Thinking of this, Su Luo's heart was once more seized with worry. If that woman was capable of being the Thorn's leader, how could she be an ordinary person? Nangong Liyun. After Nangong Liyun left, Su Luo stayed another night in the Fire Dragon Cavern. The newly formed little fellow was still in a deep slumber and showed no signs of waking up, so she carefully put them back into her space. Su Luo still hadn't forgotten why she had been forced into the Fire Dragon Cavern. In the end, it had been because of the magic fire. Right now, Su Luo was at the bottom of all the magma, with mostly mystic fire and occasionally metamorphosis fire flashing all around. However, Su Luo's objective was the spiritual fire. After searching for most of the night, Su Luo finally found the spiritual fire, and she carefully collected it and put it away. Because she was thinking about Li Man Man, who was still outside, Su Luo left the Fire Dragon Cavern after collecting the spiritual fire. But once she exited and was about to go back, Su Luo, so you were actually here? This is truly a case of breaking through iron shoes with number 1 inch. An aggressive yell resounded in front of Su Luo, and upon hearing this familiar voice, her heart sank. This person was none other than the one who had previously been chasing and trying to kill Su Luo, only for Su Luo to trick her Fairy Wu Yu. Previously, Su Luo had used the mimic doll, transforming it into her likeness, to lure Fairy Wu Yu away so that she could escape. Fairy Wu Yu had wandered in circles around the Fire Dragon Cavern for quite some time before finally managing to exit. Who would think that she would have such good luck to encounter Su Luo right after she came out? So she charged forwards without saying anything besides, "Wretched brat, go die." Fairy Wu Yu's heart was full of resentment and sought to kill. As far as their true strengths went, there was a sizable difference in strengths between them. So Su Luo turned around and ran away at lightning speed. Still thinking of running? Let's see where you can run to after this. Panting with rage, Fairy Wu Yu chased after Su Luo. Su Luo had experience being chased by Fairy Wu Yu, so she wasn't under as much pressure this time, and was able to occasionally catch a break while running. However, Su Luo's casual attitude only further enraged Fairy Wu Yu, causing her heart to fill with endless fury. Stand still. A row of lightning and a row of flames shot towards Su Luo from both sides. Su Luo replied with a faint smile, "I'd be a fool to stand still. You're chasing me, after all." Su Luo leapt, flying higher than the lightning and flames, and with a whistle, she flew far away. Fairy Wu Yu was livid with rage. But Su Luo also knew that if she kept being chased like this, things would not be easy to deal with. Would she have to continue hiding even after returning to the genius training camp? She needed a plan that could be the best of both worlds. Su Luo blinked her eyes in thought, rapidly moving about. Very soon, her eyes shone like crystals, flashing like the stars. How could she have forgotten? This was a class group activity. If she couldn't suppress Fairy Wu Yu, then she just needed to find someone else who could. And in the Demon Clan's fire territory, the one who could suppress Fairy Wu Yu was obviously the 8th Elder. Su Luo quickly fished out the crystal-white jade bottle from her space, which had the 8th Elder's life soul in it. Through this soul, she could sense the 8th Elder's existence. Once Su Luo found a moment to put some spiritual power into it, As expected, she quickly felt an indistinct sensation, which grew clearer as more of her spiritual power was infused into it. Chapter 2264. Affection 7. Hurry, hurry, hurry. Run to the 8th elder quickly. Su Luo cheered with excitement in her heart, and her feet moved even faster, swiftly flying to where the 8th elder was, as if she were a cannonball. Fairy Wuyu didn't know that Su Luo had a purpose in going in that direction, and continued the chase. Very soon, a figure appeared before them, and this was the 8th elder. The 8th elder was leaning atop a rock, blood staining the corners of his mouth, and all of his hair and eyebrows were cleanly burned off. Seeing the 8th elder, Su Luo stopped and turned to face Fairy Wuyu, her eyes smiling. Seeing Su Luo stop, Fairy Wuyu sneered. "Why did you stop? Don't want to run anymore? Aren't you able to run really fast?" "Nope, not running anymore." Su Luo gestured and casually sat down next to the 8th elder, taking out her bottle and drinking from it. Fairy Wuyu would have found this funny if it didn't also make her furious. She had never seen someone remain so leisurely and carefree while being hunted down, and Su Luo's relaxed appearance rendered Fairy Wuyu speechless. "Get up and face your death." Fairy Wuyu gestured for Su Luo to stand up. Who would have thought that Su Luo would instead wave her hands and then turn to prod the unconscious 8th elder beside her? "Hey, wake up, it's time to fight." Fairy Wuyu immediately widened her eyes. At this moment, she finally realized that this charred black person was the 8th elder. Fairy Wuyu was shocked. "The 8th elder?" Su Luo raised her eyebrows in triumph, spread her hands, and dusted herself off. "You don't say? Didn't you want to fight? Then have a go with the 8th elder." Sent into disarray. Fairy Wuyu glared at Su Luo. Rubbish. She was tired of going along with Su Luo's nonsense and charged forward. Su Luo took this opportunity to quickly hide behind the 8th elder, and Fairy Wuyu was unable to hold back the force of her palm strike. So, with a bang, it squarely struck the 8th elder in the chest. Due to the force of Fairy Wuyu's palm strike, the unconscious 8th elder slowly stirred awake, and when he opened his eyes, he was met face to face with the complicated gaze of Fairy Wuyu. The 8th elder deeply knit his brows, and it was as if a portion of his memories had been pulled away, leaving a terrible headache. "You hit me?" The 8th elder looked up and fixed his sharp eyes on Fairy Wuyu. Fairy Wuyu felt a vague sense of unease. She felt that the 8th elder was different in some way, and this left her feeling somewhat at a loss. In a flash, Fairy Wuyu remembered the incident with her and the 8th elder in the little black room, and started to back away in slow motion. But she kept explaining, "8th elder, you are mistaken. I wanted to kill Su Luo, not you." Fairy Wuyu kept a smile on her face, but she was still forced back step by step, unable to retreat any further. "You actually wanted to kill me." The 8th elder fired out a beam of light. Although Fairy Wuyu didn't know why, now she was definitely sure that the 8th elder wanted her dead. Fairy Wuyu glared with resentment at Su Luo, who had her hands on her hips and was making faces at her. Fairy Wuyu was angered half to death, but she was unable to protect herself in this situation. Thus, she had no choice and steadily retreated. In the end, Fairy Wuyu gave Su Luo a deep look before making a swift escape. Seeing Fairy Wuyu flee in panic, Su Luo was in a much better mood. The 8th elder fixed a cold gaze on Su Luo, a gelid light glistening in his eyes, causing a chill to run down Su Luo's spine. Chapter 2265. Affection 8. Su Luo knew that the 8th elder must have already remembered what had happened before. "My life's soul is in your hands." The voice of the 8th elder was cold and icy, as if it were covered by frost. This was a declarative sentence. Su Luo hooked her lips up into a hypocritical smile and nodded. The hand at the side of the 8th elder clenched up tightly. The life soul represented his life, so the moment Su Luo crushed it, he would immediately die. In other words, Su Luo was in complete control of his life, and she could make him live or die based on her very whim. You? The eighth elder stared at Su Luo. Su Luo, however, smiled blandly. Want me to hand over the living soul? Well, that will never happen, so don't even think about it. The eighth elder. As for where it is hidden, since Nangong Luyin so assuredly put you by my side, it means that you will never be able to find that place. Su Luo smirked as she looked at the eighth elder, further undermining his self-confidence. The eighth elder was indeed so angry that he almost collapsed. Don't worry, as long as you don't mess with me and protect me whenever something happens, I won't crush your life soul. After all, it's not easy to find such a strong and powerful bodyguard. Su Luo waved her hand and said with a smile. The eighth elder was so angry that his chest rose and fell violently, and his gaze towards Su Luo flashed with a cold and compelling light. But under his gaze, Su Luo continued to smile, remaining calm and collected. The eighth elder let out a cold grunt. Although he didn't nod, his not saying anything meant he was acquiescing. Su Luo smiled. This approach of Nangong Luyin was really good. Knowing that she had made a lot of enemies in the genius training camp, he had found her such a good bodyguard. Okay, we can go back now. Su Luo nodded to the eighth elder. The eighth elder was so angry that he wanted nothing more than to tear Su Luo into pieces. But his life was in Su Luo's hands at this moment. So how could he dare to be impulsive? While climbing from the bottom to his current position, the eighth elder had experienced no less hardship and pain than anyone else. So he cherished his life more than anyone else. And so, at this moment their positions were completely reversed. Originally, the eighth elder had been the one chasing Su Luo down to seize her fallen red lotus. But now, he had become Su Luo's personal bodyguard, for her to drive him around however she wanted. Su Luo walked ahead with her head held high in a majestic way, while the eighth elder followed behind, making a great effort to suppress his anger. Within a short amount of time, they had arrived at the previous location, and at this moment, the crowd up ahead was in an uproar. Su Luo's heart trembled. It couldn't be that something had happened to Li Man, right? Su Luo pulled aside a figure dashing forwards and loudly asked them what happened. It really had to be said that a good point of Su Luo's was that her guessing was God tier. However, the bad point was that her words were crow's one. Her words had actually turned out to be the equivalent of a prophecy. Li Man had truly encountered trouble. She had followed Su Luo's words, searching for a place to hide, and at first, this had worked out okay. But now that those people were doing a complete sweep of the area, it only resulted in Li Man being discovered. Fairy Wuyu had suffered a great deal of anger because of Su Luo, and had had nowhere to vent it. And so now, upon seeing Li Man, she immediately became quite happy. Su Luo's friend? Good, very good. Fairy Wuyu patted Mo's shoulder. You did a good job, I am very pleased. Mo's pale face blushed slightly red from the compliment, and his eyes were as if they had been washed with water, and he gazed at Fairy Wuyu with excitement and joy in his eyes. For the sake of his Fairy Wuyu, even if he were to go through fire and give up his life, he had to do it. Mo's secretly clenched his fist in the depths of his heart. Chapter 2266, Affection 9. After praising Mo's, Fairy Wuyu simply pushed him aside, slowly walked up to Li Man, facing Li Man's angry face. Slap! Fairy Wuyu fiercely slapped Li Man's face. Li Man was instantly hit aside. Her originally pink and white cheek was now puffed and swollen on one side, with bright red blood dripping from the corner of her mouth. Her head had also hit the hard rock, making her dizzy and bleary-eyed. She staggered and tried to get back up, but before she had the chance to recover her balance, Fairy Wuyu had already walked up to her slowly and kicked her viciously where her heart was. Poof! Poor Li Man was kicked into the air and fiercely spat out a mouthful of blood, spraying Fairy Wuyu all over her face. Wretch! Fairy Wuyu raised her hand and wiped it across her face, and when she found that it was covered in blood, She was so angry that she almost went crazy. She walked up furiously, her cold sword raised high in her hand. Right at this critical moment, Su Luo descended like a heavenly goddess. "Stop it!" Su Luo arrived at Li Man Man's side using teleportation and pulled her to the side, and in the same instant, Fairy Wu Yu's sword slashed downwards. The place where Li Man Man was originally standing was now split into a deep gash. Su Luo glared at Fairy Wu Yu, her eyes bursting with flaming anger. Fairy Wu Yu laughed coldly. "Su Luo, you've finally come." Su Luo took out the last Emperor-grade blood condensation pill and hurriedly gave it to Li Man Man to preserve her life. Then she set Li Man Man down by the rock not far away, then walked back to the original position and stood still, staring Fairy Wu Yu down for some time. The corners of Fairy Wu Yu's mouth pulled up into a sneer. But, slap! Su Luo slapped Fairy Wu Yu fiercely. Fairy Wu Yu was caught off guard and couldn't come back to her senses, and just like that she was slapped by Su Luo. "Stinky girl!" Fairy Wu Yu was furious and was about to rush towards Su Luo. Just at that moment, the 8th Elder gave a clear cough. Fairy Wu Yu was instantly like a mouse that had seen a cat, and her entire body cowered for a moment. She turned her head and weakly looked at the 8th Elder. "How do you—" At this time, Fairy Wu Yu had her back to Su Luo, and so at this very moment, Su Luo flew up and kicked towards her backside with all of the strength she could muster. How could Fairy Wu Yu have expected Su Luo to be so emboldened? So once again, she was caught off guard and kicked by Su Luo. She stumbled towards the 8th Elder, who she was facing. The 8th Elder frowned and subconsciously took a step back. The poor Fairy Wu Yu couldn't stop her momentum and fell face down to the ground. Su Luo's mocking tone rang out at this time. "Oh, Fairy Wu Yu is giving such a big salute to the 8th Elder. Is there something she wants to ask him?" Fairy Wu Yu climbed back up fiercely, glaring at Su Luo with hatred, her bulging eyes appearing nearly bloodshot. Before she met Su Luo, she had never been embarrassed from her childhood to now, but after meeting Su Luo, she was embarrassed every time she saw her. "Su Luo, I'm not waiting for the 1-year contract. I'll just kill you now." Fairy Wu Yu hissed and replied, looking as if she was about to rush towards Su Luo. But Su Luo still had a light and shallow smile on her face. Just as Fairy Wu Yu was about to strike, at some point the 8th Elder appeared in front of Su Luo and shielded her behind him. "8th Elder!" Fairy Wu Yu was so angry that her face turned red as she fiercely glared at the 8th Elder. Chapter 2267, Affection 10. With a straight, solemn face, the 8th Elder shot a cold and stern gaze at Fairy Wu Yu. 4 fellow students to murder each other so dreadfully. "Wu Yu, you've broken the rules." Fairy Wu Yu tried to refute it. The Genius Training Camp's rules had never tied her down before. These rules were for other people, and she, Fairy Wu Yu, had always placed herself above the rules. "Even though you have the 3rd and 7th Elders protecting you, during my lessons, you ought to abide by the rules that should be followed. Otherwise, in normal circumstances, Fairy Wu Yu would probably act spoiled and try to suck up to him." However, thinking back to the killing intent the 8th Elder was aiming towards her, her heart immediately sank. Fairy Wu Yu was afraid of the 8th Elder, and the Elder was controlled by Su Luo. This was just like a big fish eating small fish, while the small fish ate small shrimps, with everything having their natural predator. Under the 8th Elder's abuse of authority, Fairy Wu Yu didn't dare to take even half a step forward. The 8th Elder snorted, "I've already warned you once. The next time you dare to raise a hand against a fellow disciple in class, you're on your own." Fairy Wu Yu was so mad, the veins on her forehead pulsed angrily. Nevertheless, it was a real pity that her number 1 backer wasn't here. The 8th Elder had been bought over by Su Luo. Very good. Fairy Wu Yu clenched her fist and silently started to hate the 8th Elder in her heart. "Let's go." Fairy Wu Yu took her group of men and quickly left. After they had left, The eighth elder fiercely glared at Su Luo. It felt truly awful to be under someone else's control. Su Luo shrugged, feeling too lazy to deal with the eighth elder's bad mood. She quickly went to Li Manman's side and knelt down to carefully treat her wounds. Su Luo's eyes were filled with guilt as she looked at Li Manman. She knew that there was no enmity between Fairy Wu Yu and Li Manman, so she had only gotten injured by Fairy Wu Yu because Su Luo had involved her in it. After bustling about for a long while, Su Luo finally managed to help Li Manman regain consciousness. Li Manman half opened her eyes, her breathing weak. Su Luo hurriedly reassured her, "Don't worry, Fairy Wu Yu has already left. She can't hurt us anymore." Li Manman gave a weak nod, before looking guiltily at Su Luo. The metamorphosis fire has been refined by Immerse. She recalled that Su Luo only faced Fairy Wu Yu because she had been trying to help her grab the metamorphosis fire. But Su Luo just laughed when she heard that. Su Luo's heart was lined with all of the shame and guilt she was facing. Opening her right hand, a small flame quickly appeared inside a crystal bottle. "Guess what I have here?" Su Luo was in a good mood. Li Manman's eyes fell onto the clear crystal bottle in Su Luo's hand. Contained within it was an exceedingly peculiar flame seedling, appearing to be just as weak as fire on a matchstick. It burned a faint saffron yellow, and it looked very warm. Furthermore, this flame seemed to be very lively, cheerfully darting about inside the glittering crystal bottle, dancing in circles as though it had no concept of what exhaustion was. Li Manman immediately sat up with a cry of surprise. Isn't this flame brimming with a little too much spirituality? Li Manman could tell that this flame's origin was definitely far from ordinary, because its scent was purer than any other flame she had seen before. This is a spiritual fire. Su Luo stuffed it into Li Manman's hand, then said with a smile, "It doesn't matter if Immerse refined the metamorphosis fire. We now have this spiritual fire." Li Manman stared at Su Luo in utter amazement. Just how did Su Luo get her hands on the spiritual fire with such ease? That was a spiritual fire. A spiritual fire. The highest grade of any fire. Chapter 2268. The Way Back. 1. Li Manman stared at Su Luo in silence, not knowing how to respond. Su Luo chased Li Manman to keep the spiritual fire. When you return, find a place to quickly refine it. You want to avoid delaying too long, in case trouble arises. Got it? Li Manman nodded her head vigorously in excitement. A spiritual fire. This bottle in her hand held a spiritual fire. How could she not get emotional? Even the captain only had mystic fire, but she now had a spiritual fire. At this moment, Li Manman seriously wished she could stay by Su Luo's side and serve her. Every time she was with Su Luo, treasures that one could only dream about appeared just like toys in her hands, as though obtaining them were as easy as 1, 2, 3. After waiting for Li Manman to recover her spirits, Su Luo left the demon clan's fire territory with her. With the road being cleared by the eighth elder, Su Luo and Li Manman's journey was without obstacles, and they even exited the area earlier than Fairy Wu Yu's group. As they left the demon clan's fire territory, Su Luo heaved a deep, rough sigh. Just how fresh was this outside air? Right at this moment, Fairy Wu Yu and her group also came out. Compared to Su Luo, Fairy Wu Yu's group was in an exceedingly miserable shape, with their clothes ragged and their hair burnt off in patches here and there. In contrast, Su Luo's group was completely unharmed and sparkling clean. Nevertheless, Fairy Wu Yu was in a good mood. She held a tongue of flame with both hands and waved in front of Su Luo, a look of extreme satisfaction present within her eyes. Like a typical henchman, Immerse bragged to Su Luo, "You couldn't find the metamorphosis fire, right? Well, this is a spiritual fire." Fairy Wu Yu had actually found a spiritual fire? Su Luo raised her brows slightly, while giving an ambiguous smile. "Are you jealous?" "Hee hee." Immerse sneered. "Jealous? What was there to be jealous about?" Su Luo just thought it was funny. She had an exotic fire with her, And as for spiritual fire, she had caught 2 of them, one which she gave to Li Man, and the other for emergency use. Su Luo then conveniently accessed her space, the corners of her mouth lifting into a smile ever so slightly. Spiritual fire, was it? Sounds like nobody has one. Just as she said that, the small, blazing red flame appeared in her hand, its fiery red glow giving anyone extreme satisfaction when looking at it. Once Su Luo took out the spiritual fire, everyone present stared in shock, their mouths almost drooling with envy. Each of them affixed ferocious gazes on Su Luo, causing her to feel very good about herself. Might as well not wait any longer and do it now. Su Luo hooked the corners of her mouth into a smile. This spiritual fire is of no use to me, so I might as well give it away since you all happen to be here. Everyone had guessed that Su Luo had the spiritual fire on her earlier, so Su Luo planned to settle things here in a vague way, so that nobody would think twice about it after it was over. Otherwise, if news spread that she had exotic fire with her, and another 8th elder came to chase her, how could she survive? Once Su Luo said this, all of the students were shouting and jumping in excitement. Su Luo had been very clear about it. She was going to give that little spiritual flame seedling away. There were 30 people here, which meant that each had a 1 in 30 hope. Thus, pair after pair of sparkling eyes all fixed on Su Luo. Su Luo thought for a moment before saying, "It'll be simple. We'll play a guessing game." Su Luo closed her fist, then smiled at the crowd. "Guess how many stones I have in my hand, and the first to get it right will get the spiritual fire." Everyone was bewildered. "That's simple? You all want something more complicated?" Su Luo shrugged and said in a casual manner, "If you really want something more complicated." Chapter 2269. The way back to no. That's good. Good enough. Everyone said quickly. What a joke. If Su Luo had proposed a one-on-one match where the prize would belong to whoever the winner was, each of them wouldn't even stand 1/30th of a chance to win the spiritual fire. Su Luo smiled and casually curled her finger at the person behind Fairy Wu Yu. "You guys can come and participate too." This, Mose hesitated. To tell the truth, they were very excited as this was spiritual fire, and spiritual fire was extremely rare to come by. Didn't you see how excited Fairy Wu Yu was about it? But Mose and the others glanced at Fairy Wu Yu. Fairy Wu Yu's face was dark at that moment, so dark that ink could almost drip out. She glared at Mose and the men, immediately silencing them, with no one daring to say a word. "Huh, isn't that just a spiritual fire? I will help you all find it when I have the chance." Fairy Wu Yu crossed her arms in a domineering fashion. Although Mose and the others didn't respond, deep inside, all of them weren't convinced by her words. If spiritual fire was so easy to find, would Fairy Wu Yu show such emotions after finding one? But in the end, they did not voice any of these doubts out, only silently turning their eyes away from Su Luo. Su Luo was secretly amused. In any case, she had accomplished what she wanted to do. The rest of the classmates didn't have any objections either, because without the participation of Mose, their chances would naturally increase. All right, since some people quit, we should just disregard them. Let's start guessing now, but everyone has only one chance. Su Luo raised her right hand high. This was a guessing game. There was only one spiritual fire in this cluster, and it would belong to the first person who guessed correctly. So everyone scrambled and started calling their guesses. 1, 3, 5. Soon almost everyone shouted again. Looking at how happy everyone was, Mose began to have mixed feelings, and his eyes fell on Su Luo several times. Upon seeing this with her sullen heart, Fairy Wu Yu coldly scolded, "If you want to change teams, then go ahead. But after this, you won't be my people anymore." With such ruthless words, who would dare to talk back? The group had no other choice but to just quietly suppress their thoughts. Soon, Su Luo was ready to end this competition. Who guessed that there are 7 pieces? Su Luo shouted slowly. Everyone immediately looked at each other, and then all of them reacted. Could this be the correct answer? "It's me! It's me! It's me!" In an instant, 3 or 5 people rushed forward, surrounding Su Luo as they scrambled to speak. However, Su Luo gave a slight frown as she looked at them. Some people immediately understood Su Luo's concerns, because there was only one spiritual fire in the cluster, yet there were so many people. And thus, these people started to argue loudly. You clearly called 3 pieces just now. Hey, so what if I called 3 pieces? Didn't you call for pieces? I'm the one who called 7 pieces. Go away, all of you. Bah! You didn't even guess. You just waited for Su Luo to announce the answer before rushing forward and claiming it's your guess. The 5 people quarreled till their faces were flushed, and they almost started fighting. Su Luo watched, silently amused. These people were all ranked 50th to 100th on the dragon list. If they were on the mainland, they could all trample an entire city with a single stomp. However, right at this moment, they were just like kindergarten kids fighting over a toy. How could Su Luo not be overwhelmed by the emotions surging through her heart? Chapter 2270. The Way Back 3. Seeing that they were about to fight, and Fairy Wu Yu about to walk off in glee, a smile curled up at the corner of Su Luo's mouth. Slowly now. Su Luo raised her hand. Are all of you saying that you called 7 just now? The 5 people said in unison. No one expected Su Luo to smile lightly before waving her hand. You're all wrong. Now go off to the side. All 5 jaws dropped. No one had expected such a result. Then Su Luo began to ask again. Who guessed 5? The audience instantly turned silent at Su Luo's question. People started looking at each other, but no one stepped forward for a while. Earlier, Su Luo had fooled them, so she wouldn't do it again, right? And so, after coming to a conclusion from Su Luo's expression, 3 more people ran forward in proclamation. Who knew this time Su Luo would wave her hand once again? Okay, off to the side. The 3 people. Su Luo felt quietly amused and once again asked, who guessed 9 pieces? Please step out of the line. At that moment, no one dared stand up. Weren't the lessons learned from the previous 2 groups enough? However, someone raised his hand honestly and said in a meek voice, It was a tall and thin man. Su Luo remembered that he was the one who had spoken up for her when she had a conflict with Fairy Wu Yu. In fact, Su Luo remembered that this person had really guessed 9 before, and now he also truthfully stepped forward in proclamation. Are you certain you guessed 9? Su Luo frowned slightly. I am certain, he said firmly. Just when everyone thought that this person was an idiot, Su Luo laughed. She slowly opened her hands, and there were 9 pebbles of equal size neatly lined up inside. 9 pieces. Truly, there are 9. How is this possible? Li Yuan actually got it right. If I'd known, I would have stepped up too. I guessed 9 before. Surprised shouts erupted from the crowd. Some were shocked, some were sad, and some were extremely regretful. In short, there was a mix of emotions on everyone's face. Nevertheless, Su Luo didn't have time to pay attention to this. The reason she took out this spiritual fire was for the sole reason of rubbing it in Fairy Wu Yu's face. After handing over the spiritual fire, Su Luo was ready to go back. Thanks to the leadership of the 8th Elder, they all headed back safe and sound, without conflict. Not long after, everyone returned to the Genius Training Camp. Upon returning, everyone wasn't allowed to go home yet, but had to return to the classroom. A summary meeting based on the performance of these 3 classes would be conducted to select the best student to accept commendation from the Elders Association. In the past, that candidate had always been Fairy Wu Yu, and there was utterly no competition at all. But right now, that didn't seem to be the case anymore. Because the votes were in the hands of the people, not the elders. So, in the ballot box, everyone anonymously voted for the person they wanted. The whole class had a total of 30 votes. Fairy Wu Yu squinted at Su Luo. Although Su Luo had stolen the spotlight for these 3 classes, Fairy Wu Yu was still very confident that she was the focal point of the entire class. Everyone's eyes were still on her, so she had no fear at all. And so Fairy Wuyu glanced at Su Luo with her mocking eyes, which Su Luo simply thought was utterly funny. Chapter 2271. The Way Back. 4. At Fairy Wuyu's provocations, Su Luo remained as calm as a light breeze. After Fairy Wuyu had been trampled under her 3 or 4 times in a row, Su Luo did not feel that Fairy Wuyu still had the same prestige she held before. And so, Su Luo was also looking forward to the results of this vote. Just as the votes were being announced, a dignified figure came in. The 8th Elder was already here, and this person's imposing pressure was very similar to the 8th Elder's, so Su Luo immediately guessed who he was. Could it be the 7th Elder? Sure enough, after seeing the 7th Elder, Fairy Wuyu's face immediately broke out into a brilliant smile, and she naturally latched onto his arm, her great chest rubbing on the Elder's arm. She cooed, "Master." Su Luo's hair stood on end, and her skin crawled. Compared to the 8th Elder, the 7th Elder wasn't as tall, and he didn't possess his straight-laced dignity. The 7th Elder wasn't tall. He had more of a short and sturdy build. He was even shorter than Fairy Wuyu by half a head, so it made for a humorous sight to see her cling onto his arm like a baby. Su Luo almost let out a laugh, but she still knew how to restrain herself. So she only laughed herself to tears in her heart, while tensely keeping a serious expression on her face. The 7th Elder patted Fairy Wuyu's face in appeasement and smiled dotingly. "Good girl, now go back to your seat. Master has prepared something good for you." Fairy Wuyu was extremely excited when she heard that, but she still bent over to whisper a few words into the 7th Elder's ear, which caused him to flick his eyes back and forth to Su Luo. With this, everyone knew she was complaining about Su Luo. Su Luo thought that Fairy Wuyu was being extremely childish, but she still frowned inwardly. After all, being on an elder's bad side wasn't something to be happy about. After finishing her complaints and going back, arrogance was written all over Fairy Wuyu's face as she eyed Su Luo with ridicule. Seeing the simultaneously awed and helpless looks on the students' faces, Fairy Wuyu felt even more satisfied. Su Luo had stolen the spotlight earlier, causing her to lose face, but with the 7th Elder personally overseeing them, who would still dare to look down on her. After the 7th Elder was seated, his gaze wandered to Su Luo, and though he creased his brows, a hint of surprise flashed across his eyes. He was stunned by her captivating appearance. While the 7th Elder was in a daze, the ballot counting started. Once it started, Fairy Wuyu's initially triumphant expression instantly turned sour, because she actually realized that Su Luo's number of votes were side by side with hers. Originally, Fairy Wuyu thought that such a thing was impossible, and though Su Luo's votes were less than hers, it wasn't by much. 1 for Su Luo. 1 for Fairy Wuyu. 1 for Su Luo. 1 for Su Luo. 1 for Fairy Wuyu. As the person continued reading out the tickets, Fairy Wuyu's face slowly turned downcast. Because after 20 votes, Su Luo had unexpectedly caught up to her. Fairy Wuyu had 10 votes. Su Luo also had 10 votes. The two of them actually had the exact same number of votes. What an exciting development. At this moment, the entire audience was in an uproar. Just how long had it been? Su Luo actually already held such great prestige among the class. Fairy Wuyu had been the only one at the top for years. Was today going to bring an end to that? In an instant, the entire audience's eyes were brilliantly glittering while excitedly fixing their gaze to the blackboard, eagerly waiting for the count to continue. Chapter 2272. The Way Back. 5. The 7th Elder, who had been calmly drinking tea, was momentarily shocked. Astonished, he looked at Fairy Wuyu, his eyes also faintly drifting to Su Luo. But how could Wuyu lose to that newcomer? The 7th Elder maintained his confidence in Fairy Wuyu, and so he continued drinking his tea leisurely. Fairy Wuyu could barely remain seated. "I demand for the person counting the ballots to be changed." Fairy Wuyu slammed the table and stood up. Li Yuan was the one who Su Luo sent the spiritual fire to, Who knows if he purposely counted some of the ballots as Su Luo's. The one counting ballots right now was none other than the one whom Su Luo had given the spiritual fire to. With a frosty expression, Li Yuyun solemnly said, "Fairy Wu Yu, please look at things clearly. For the sake of fairness, the 8th Elder looks over each ballot before I announce them." "Are you questioning the 8th Elder?" Fairy Wu Yu really wanted to say that the 8th Elder had always sided with Su Luo, and that he had even nearly killed himself for her sake in a little black room. But who would actually believe that? It can't be that Fairy Wu Yu is actually going to lose, right? At first, I didn't think she would lose, but look, she's already lost confidence in herself and is beginning to panic. Seeing this, I think Su Luo is the more poised and generous one out of the two. True, Fairy Wu Yu has always treated the spiritual fire as a treasure, but Su Luo was able to just give it away so freely. Looking at it from this perspective, Su Luo is much more generous. Many people whispered to one another throughout the classroom, causing Fairy Wu Yu to feel so mad that she almost fainted. The 8th Elder cast an icy glance at Fairy Wu Yu. "You dare question my integrity?" Anyone could see that the 8th Elder was truly angry. The 7th Elder faintly smiled. "Old 8th, what are you so agitated for? Fairy Wu Yu is still a child. She's not very understanding of things." After placating the 8th Elder, the 7th Elder coldly eyed Wu Yu. "Hurry up and sit down. Where is your decency? Do you not have confidence in yourself?" Fairy Wu Yu had no choice but to sit down indignantly, her gaze fixated on Li Yuyun. Li Yuyun once again started counting the ballots, but this time he was more deliberate about it. After the 8th Elder, he also let the 7th Elder look over it. The 7th Elder was Fairy Wu Yu's master, so surely she would have no more suspicions after he too had a look. One for Su Luo. One for Su Luo. One for Su Luo. One for Fairy Wu Yu. One for Su Luo. One for Su Luo. Fairy Wu Yu's face turned frightfully ashen, as if dark clouds had cast a shadow over her. She clenched her fists tightly, and the blue veins on the back of her hands pulsated agitatedly. She glared at Su Luo with a burning hot gaze. The 7th Elder, who had been leisurely reclining in his seat, now sat straight up. He had thought that Wu Yu would definitely win, so he had prepared something really good for Hera's spirit-absorbing stone, which was of great help to one's cultivation. And it was because it was only intended for Wu Yu that he had forced himself to grit his teeth and give it away. But who knew? At this moment, the 7th Elder seriously wished he could stuff that gift back up his sleeve. Looking at the gift on the table, the 7th Elder had a complicated expression, and he stared at Su Luo with a cold glint in his eyes. The final results were out. Su Luo had 17 votes. Fairy Wu Yu had 13 votes. Once Li Yuyun announced the final results, the entire venue was shocked and was followed by utter silence because everyone noticed the 7th Elder's unsightly, ashen face. When everyone's eyes were fixed on the 7th Elder, only then did the old man realize that he was being too conspicuous. Chapter 2273. The Way Back 6. At this moment, changing the gift was no longer an option, so the 7th Elder could only grit and grind his teeth as he raised his hands to greet Su Luo, awarding the prize to her. Amidst the wild spurts of anger shooting out from the depths of Fairy Wu Yu's eyes, Su Luo smilingly accepted the prize. Although she didn't know what the prize was, since it was specially prepared for Fairy Wu Yu by the 7th Elder, and looking at the 7th Elder's chagrined expression, Su Luo could guess that the prize must be extraordinary. The 7th Elder looked at Su Luo and pulled up the corners of his mouth, and then patted Su Luo's shoulder amiably, like an elder encouraging a junior. "Not bad, little girl. Keep up the good work." Just as the 7th Elder patted his hand on Su Luo's shoulder, Su Luo immediately felt a strong force surging towards her shoulder. That flame strike was powerful and forceful, with a little bit of probing intent. At that moment, Su Luo understood that the 7th Elder was beginning to suspect her as well. A cold smile flashed in Su Luo's heart, and then poof, Su Luo's wildly spurted out a mouthful of blood, And then she turned around and looked at the seventh elder incredulously, with shock, surprise, disbelief, aggression, resentment, and so on flashing across her eyes. Su Luo's weak body staggered back a step, and her dark, tearful eyes looked at the seventh elder, then at Fairy Wu Yu, and then her body collapsed softly. All of this happened far too suddenly. The seventh elder was a bit overwhelmed by this reaction. The seventh elder froze, looking at Su Luo, and then looking at his own palm. He had only been trying to test the depth of this girl's strength. Why did it now look like he was trying to plot against her? Was this girl made of paper? This fragile? But when everyone present stared at the seventh elder with condemning and angry eyes, the seventh elder instantly knew. He had been wrongly accused by Su Luo. The seventh elder wanted to explain, but faced with those pairs of bright and snow-like gazes, he was immediately at a loss on how to defend himself. Furthermore, he was a high and mighty elder. Did he still need to explain himself to the trainees? At once, he coldly hummed and made to leave with a flick of his sleeve. "Stop!" An angry voice forced its way towards the seventh elder. Li Man rushed up with big steps, hugging Su Luo while loudly denouncing the seventh elder. "What did you do to Su Luo? Tell me, what exactly did you do to her?" The seventh elder snorted coldly and put his hands behind his back. Li Man, with tears from her anger, cried out, "You're an elder. How could you hold such personal grudges?" "That's right." The crowd on the stage echoed in unison with one voice. The seventh elder was so angry that he was fuming with rage. Li Man continued to cry and shout. Luo doesn't have a powerful master to back her up, nor does she have a group of men surrounding her. She was able to win against Fairy Wu Yu because she herself has the strength, so she deserves it. That's right. The students all stared at the seventh elder angrily. The seventh elder's face was blue. As an elder, you should know better than anyone else that it is forbidden to hurt people in private. But now, in front of everyone's eyes, you are taking personal revenge to vent your anger for the sake of Fairy Wu Yu, and you are openly hurting the most outstanding student in this examination. Seventh elder, how could you do this? The students below the stage crusade with one voice. Seventh elder, how could you do this? This. Since they were at the top of the mountain, their chorus shout rang out almost straight through the clouds, and even more so, echoed continuously in the secluded valley and spread far out into the distance. Chapter 2274. The Way Back 7. At this moment, the seventh elder was so angry that his face turned red, close to collapsing with fury. This was a slander. Huge slander. He indeed planned to eventually deal with Su Luo, but just now he had only been testing the waters. Furthermore, before he could even get the chance to try and deal with her, Su Luo had already stolen the show. No, just now he had not done much at all, so this Su Luo had to be pretending. She must have forced out that mouthful of blood herself. At this moment, the seventh elder's brain flashed with understanding, and he realized the key point here. If he wanted to clear his name today, there was only one way to do so, and that was to prove that Su Luo was simply perfectly fine. Stomp. The seventh elder strode towards Su Luo with quick steps. "You stand up." As soon as the seventh elder swept Li Man away, he reached out to carry Su Luo and was about to lift her up. Just at this moment, a large palm suddenly reached out, and quick as a flash of lightning, exchanged 10 palms with the seventh elder, instantly forcing the seventh elder back. "Old eighth, what are you doing?" The seventh elder roared at the eighth elder. Old eighth had always been on the same side as him, and the two of them had always been in and out of the elders' association together, but now old eight had actually blocked him off for the sake of a tiny trainee. The seventh elder simply could not believe this. But how could the seventh elder know that the eighth elder's life was being controlled by Su Luo's hands? If Su Luo were to be crushed to death by the seventh elder, then he would also die along with her. Therefore, the eighth elder just stared coldly at the seventh elder. "Stop! You!" The seventh elder was furious. But the eighth elder stood firmly in front of Su Luo, his face cold and solemn, his expression tight and firm. Fine, fine, fine. I will remember this, old eighth. The seventh elder pointed at the eighth elder and spat out his fierce words with immense anger. Then he frustratedly left. The bright eyes of the trainees were all condemning him, their gazes as sharp as swords. Fairy Wuyu looked dumbfounded. She hadn't expected things to take such a dramatic turn. Moreover, she hadn't expected for the seventh elder to leave in such a wretched manner. Not to mention that the seventh elder would be left with a very unpleasant reputation after this. Seventh elder is really being too unfair. Even if he wanted to retaliate, at least he should have done it in private. How dare he retaliate so openly? Yes. What will people think of the seventh elder if he is so openly biased? I think the eighth elder is much better than the seventh elder. Yes, the seventh elder is simply abominable. Hearing these words, Fairy Wuyu's fists clenched tightly. Finally, amidst the complaints of the crowd, she was also forced to leave early. At this time, Su Luo's fame was unprecedentedly high. Li Man sent Su Luo back to the castle. Right after returning to the castle, Su Luo, who had originally appeared as if she would die at any moment, suddenly opened her eyes. Li Man was startled, then surprised and jumped up, crying and laughing. Luo, you're awake? I was really scared to death. Su Luo smilingly sat up and lifted the quilt to get out of bed, but she was held down by Li Man. Your injuries are very serious. The eighth elder already said for you to lie in bed and rest. Su Luo smiled and waved her hand. How are my injuries serious? There's no injury at all? Okay. Impossible. Before, you were hurt so badly by the seventh elder. You almost stopped breathing. Li Man saw Su Luo pounding the bed and laughing, and she instantly realized, you were pretending? Well, how was it? Wasn't my acting realistic? Su Luo was close to tears from laughing. Li Man immediately burst into fits of laughter. You? Ugh, I was almost scared to death by you. How realistic do you think it was? Chapter 2275, The Conflict 1. Li Man thought through the major points of this. Recalling how the seventh elder had to run away after being wronged, she didn't know whether to laugh or to cry. You really made the seventh elder miserable. He was meant to be framed from the start. Who told him to be Fairy Wuyu's master? Thus, he naturally counts as my enemy, Su Luo said, waving her hand. By the way, wasn't the old man supposed to give me a reward? Where are the items? Here it is. Li Man observed a minute of silence for the seventh elder. This old man had provoked Su Luo. How pitiful was he? He had just met her, yet not only did he have to give up a prize to Su Luo, but she had also forced him to run away in embarrassment. Oh! When Su Luo opened the gift, her eyes lit up and shone brightly. Top-grade spirit-absorbing stone? This old man is really generous. This top-grade spirit-absorbing stone was the best material for making master spirit absorption pills. With this top-grade spirit-absorbing stone, Su Luo could refine master spirit absorption pills. She could use these pills herself, and also give them to her friends and the people by her side. Li Man said with bitterness. He thought it was for Fairy Wuyu, so he was obviously willing to give it up to her. Who would have thought that you'd hit the jackpot? In my view, the seventh elder must now be feeling his heart, head, and body ache all over. Su Luo was in high spirits, thinking of the distressed look of the seventh elder. She stayed in the Wuchen Mountain for more than half a month, pretending to be recuperating. During this period of time, Su Luo gained a thorough understanding of Upstream Mountain from top to bottom with Li Man's guidance. It was at this time that she finally learned that there was a pill refining tower in Upstream Mountain and that there were all kinds of medicinal materials in the tower. It seemed that the last time senior brother Luo let her enter the magical bee zone had been for gaining the experience. Big Sister Wei and the Xiao Luo team entered the magical bee zone previously but had yet to return, so Su Luo pulled Li Man along with her again. Su Luo wanted to refine the spirit absorption pills and use up this top-grade spirit-absorbing stone that the seventh elder had given to her. Keeping it would cause her nights to be filled with worry and unpleasant dreams. She learned that she had been far too narrow-sighted before. This upstream mountain not only housed the top 100 people in the dragon list, but also the top 100 apothecaries in the pill refining tower. These apothecaries were caught up in research and did not leave their homes. Most of them were very low profile on a regular basis, so their presence was not particularly pronounced. That was why Su Luo only knew about them now. Our fifth and sixth elders are both apothecaries, and the entire pill refining tower is under their control, Li Man told Su Luo. Fifth elder and sixth elder? Su Luo muttered. Are their pill refining skills at a very high level? They should be, Li Man answered with a nod. Even if they are not at the Grandmaster level, their skills can't be far from it. Su Luo nodded her head. It was very difficult to be promoted to a Grandmaster pill refiner. She was stuck at this exact critical point and couldn't be promoted no matter what she did. Thinking of the agreement with Nangong Luyun, Su Luo felt somewhat anxious in the depths of her heart. After their separation, Nangong Luyun's strength had improved a lot. Su Luo, on the other hand, had little success with pill refining. When exactly could she finally be promoted to a Grandmaster Apothecary? Su Luo decided that she had to focus on refining medicine in the following period of time. With Li Man leading the way, Su Luo quickly found the pill refining tower. The pill refining tower was very tall, so much so that it towered into the clouds and one couldn't even see its peak. Its external appearance looked like that of an ordinary tower, but it was only after entering inside that you could realize how large it truly was. Pushing past each small room, it was apparent the space inside was so large that it was quite shocking. It was obvious that there was a whole other world inside the pill refining tower. Chapter 2276. Conflict 2. Acting in accordance with the rules. Old Wang still stopped her and persuaded her heartily. Young lady, you really can't go in. Su Luo smiled faintly and waved a token in front of Old Wang. It was the qualification certificate of an advanced apothecary. Back then, Master Rong Yun had casually thrown it to Su Luo in case of emergency, but Su Luo hadn't expected it to actually be of use. Naturally, Su Luo was not just an advanced apothecary. However, because she had never been evaluated by the Apothecary Union, she only had the certificate of an advanced apothecary, although she had the strength of a Grandmaster apothecary. Old Wang looked at Su Luo's qualification certificate for an advanced apothecary, and his eyes shook slightly. When he looked at Su Luo again, there was a lot more eagerness in his gaze. Can we go in now? Li Man was smug. Old Wang smiled bitterly. Even if you can enter, this old man still has to advise you girls. You shouldn't go in for now. Because of that apothecary Li? Su Luo pointed to the back of the now unseen apothecary Li. Old Wang nodded his head. Apothecary Li is a leader amongst the younger generation and the beloved pupil of the fifth elder. He holds high prestige in the pill refining tower. Since he doesn't see you in a good light, you will only encounter trouble if you go in. Su Luo had to laugh at herself for her bad luck. She hadn't even been in the upstream mountain for that long, yet she had already offended several of the elder's disciples either intentionally or unknowingly. Nevertheless, he just doesn't like the sight of me. It's not as if he can do anything to me, Su Luo said nonchalantly. Chapter 2277. Conflict 3. Then she signaled Li Man to enter. As Old Wang watched Su Luo enter the tower, he shook his head helplessly. He hoped there would be no conflict with Apothecary Li, otherwise this young lady would suffer a loss. The first floor of the pill refining tower was where the more common herbs were placed. From the second level onward, more precious herbs gradually appeared. To refine the spirit-absorbing pill, Su Luo already had 5 kinds of medicinal herbs in her hand. She had to pick up another 9 from here. It was only from the 3rd floor onwards that Su Luo found the herbs she wanted. Duan Ming grass, Bodhi's seven-tailed leaf. Red nine-star summon. Su Luo's eyes were glowing as she looked at these herbs with interest. The medicinal herbs were placed on the shelves, just like in the supermarket Su Luo had shopped at in her previous life. After picking everything up, she would pay for them at the exit. Watching as Su Luo endlessly took herbs from the shelf with her fingers, a drop of cold sweat broke out on the tip of Li Manman's nose. She hesitated for a moment and stopped to tug at Su Luo's sleeve. Seeing Li Manman's furtive look, Su Luo couldn't help but ask, "What's wrong? Do you have enough points to pay for these items?" Li Manman whispered to Su Luo with a lowered her voice. "In my calculations, I only have 100,000 points at the most." Li Manman knew that Su Luo had a huge sum of tens of millions of points previously, but hadn't they already been spent on the gravity chamber? She was very happy to see Su Luo taking the herbs, but when she looked at the prices on the shelf, she felt quite heartbroken. These herbs were not at all cheap. Each herb on the third floor started at a price of 30,000. Furthermore, Su Luo didn't just take one stalk of the herbs, but many, as if she were cleaning out the entire shelf. Watching this made Li Manman's palms break out into cold sweat. After Li Manman mentioned it to her, Su Luo started to notice the prices on the shelf. She was so excited earlier that she only cared about taking all the herbs and had forgotten about their prices. Looking at it, Su Luo sucked in a breath of cold air. So expensive, right? How about getting just one of each first? Li Manman suggested kindly. Su Luo pondered for a moment. Then a bright light flashed in her eyes as if dawn had been replaced by the morning sun, and her eyes shone as dazzlingly as snow. "It's okay. When the boat gets to the pier head, it will go straight with the current. The mountain man will naturally have a clever plan." 1-inch Su Luo waved her hand to dismiss Li Manman's worries, appearing similar to a wise old god. "Huh!" A sneer rang out behind Su Luo. Su Luo frowned and glanced back, feeling displeased. With this glance, she couldn't help but secretly let out an aggrieved sigh. The person who had sneered was none other than Li Luoming. Apothecary Li looked at Su Luo uncomfortably for a bit because of her stunning beauty. When Li Luoming made eye contact with Su Luo, the ridicule in his eyes became increasingly obvious. "Is this a place where you, a wench who doesn't know her own place, can enter? Hurry up and get out." Regardless of how good a temper Su Luo had, she wouldn't be able to bear being mocked again and again. Moreover, the high and mighty Miss Su's temper had always been very bad. Snake venom disease, too. Su Luo spat out these 3 words and then turned around to select the medicinal herb she needed. "Who are you scolding?" Although Li Luoming did not understand the meaning of Su Luo's 3 words, he could tell from her expression that she must be scolding him. Su Luo glanced at him with contempt. Then she smiled at Li Manman and said, "He doesn't even understand the words used to scold him, yet he still has the nerve to shout nonsense. Tell me, isn't he stupid?" Li Manman cooperated with Su Luo tacitly. "Really too stupid. It's fine if it's just stupidity, but to also come out here to try and show off his level of intelligence, that's simply asking to be ridiculed." Su Luo mocked Li Luoming nonchalantly. Chapter 2278. Conflict 4. Li Luoming hadn't expected Su Luo to be so venomous, and he was nearly angered to death. And after Su Luo finished scolding him, she directly pulled Li Manman with her and turned around, walking away without an ounce of guilt. "Hey, I command you to stop!" Li Luoming shouted angrily at Su Luo's back. But Su Luo only treated him as air and didn't even bother responding to him. Such blatant disregard really pushed Li Luoming's anger to the extreme. Li Luoming rushed up and tried to pull Su Luo back, but before he could grab onto Su Luo's hand, he heard a crisp ringing sound. Slap! Li Luoming was crisply slammed over the shoulders by Su Luo, falling heavily onto the ground with his facial features distorted in pain. Not everyone was the same as Su Luo, who practiced both martial arts and pill refining. The vast majority of apothecaries had weak bodies and limbs because of the years they spent in the laboratory. And Li Luoming was one out of that majority who was very weak. Su Luo had also not expected him to be so easily beaten, and for a moment she was a little dumbfounded, but then she sneered. He was a man with no power, but he still dared to act so recklessly in front of her? He deserved it. Su Luo was about to leave, but was called back by Li Luoming. "Stop right there!" Li Luoming's voice was full of power. "What? Want compensation?" Su Luo towered over him, smiling and scornful. Li Luoming clenched his fist. "You're an apothecary?" Su Luo casually hummed. Li Luoming then sneered. "Your strength is good, but in pill refining, you can never compare with me." Su Luo smiled lightly and then walked away. She was too lazy to talk nonsense with the other party. But Li Luoming got up with a grunt and followed behind Su Luo, staring down at her every move. Although Su Luo found him very annoying, since he had not made any other move to provoke her, she simply pretended that she did not see him. However, after Su Luo finished selecting herbs, Li Luoming had a knowing smile on his face. "I know what you're going to do. It turns out that you are actually going to refine spirit-absorbing pills." Su Luo raised her eyebrows, not denying his words. When Li Luoming saw Su Luo continue to ignore him, he grew extremely angry in his heart, but on the surface, he sneered, "You want to refine spirit-absorbing pills, yet you picked the wrong portions. You can't refine real spirit-absorbing pills like this." Su Luo gave him a disgusted look and went on to pay the bill in silence. For these snake venom one, the more you paid attention to them, the more they would show off. Ignoring them was the best way to deal with them. There was no other way. When the time came to pay the bill, Li Man felt extremely nervous because she knew very well Su Luo had no points in her possession. Li Luoming had previously overheard the conversation between Su Luo and Li Man and knew that she didn't have any points in hand to pay the bill. So now he gloated and looked towards Su Luo. "What are you so proud of? Pauper, unable to pay the points. Let's see how you'll get out of this." Li Luoming sneered. Li Luoming did not make any effort to lower his voice, and he even deliberately raised it louder. So some of the apothecaries waiting for payment heard his words and couldn't help but let their eyes drift towards Su Luo. On the other side of the counter, when the cleanly dressed young girl heard Li Luoming's words, she cast her eyes even more frequently towards Su Luo. The two sturdy, strong men to her left and right stared at Su Luo with their shining eyes without blinking, almost as if they saw her as a prisoner. But Su Luo still maintained her same unmoving, breezy smile. If at this time, someone knew that she had less than 10,000 points in her diamond tablet and could not even afford a blade of grass, it was unknown if they would admire her calmness in the face of danger. Chapter 2279. Conflict 5. The young girl at the pay counter was already counting the herbs in Su Luo's basket. Other people took herbs and bought them one by one, but Su Luo, on the other hand, was very odd. She took so many herbs all at once. Truly the image of a tycoon. In total 2 million points. The little girl looked at Su Luo and smilingly extended her hand. This was a big deal. Only the elders would be so generous. But now, it was up to this tycoon girl whether she could take out so many points. In full view of the crowd, amidst countless gazes, Su Luo took out her communication amulet and called the 8th elder. "Hey, old man, I don't want to pay for my medicinal herbs." "How much?" "I won 2 million points." "Yeah, first let's start with this much." "Okay, that's it. I'll hang up now." Su Luo lightly put down the communication amulet. But the entire room was suddenly so silent that it seemed the sound of leaves falling to the ground could be heard. The sound of one another's heartbeats could even be heard clearly. Could they have heard it wrong? 2 million points. This girl had actually opened her mouth and asked an old man at home for 2 million points? This was simply far too audacious. Was this true or not? It couldn't be that it was a scam, right? Not only the onlookers, but even Li Man found it very unbelievable. When had Su Luo gotten to know such a powerful old man? Su Luo still remained calm and collected, and soon enough, a subtle buzz sounded from her diamond tablet. Su Luo nodded in acknowledgement, then paid the bill and walked outside in style. That call she made just now, of course, was to the eighth elder, who told the eighth elder to be stuck on the same boat as her now. Hadn't Nangong Luyan said that? If anyone had any problems, they could just go look for the eighth elder. So, the eighth elder's money bag was now her money bag. However many points she wanted, all she needed to do was ask the eighth elder for them. After all, what kind of position did the eighth elder have here? Would he still be afraid of not having any points? It had to be known that last time, that old man had been able to earn around 3 to 5 million points. This was really too easy for him. Just at this time, Su Luo was forced to stand still again. Wait! This exasperated voice, Su Luo could guess who it belonged to without even turning around to see. There was no doubt that it was Li Luoming. You want to refine the spirit-absorbing pill? I'll accompany you. No need. Su Luo shook her head indifferently. But Li Luoming sneered. Your portions are wrong, and you didn't get enough herbs. You will never succeed. I'm kind enough to let you see what a real spirit-absorbing pill is like. Don't be so ignorant, you stinky girl. Su Luo. Upon hearing that there was excitement and drama to see, the onlookers all began to boil with anticipation. They were all apothecaries in the pill refining tower, and usually stayed inside. If they weren't doing experiments, then they were refining pills. It truly bored them to death. Now that there was a lively scene to spectate, how could they miss it? So, everyone started to raise a ruckus. Girl, Li Luoming is considered to be a genius apothecary amongst this generation. He's young and has extraordinary strength. If he teaches you, your pill refining skills will definitely soar high. If Apothecary Li can instruct you, that's a once-in-a-century opportunity for you, girl. Don't throw it away just like that. Girl, you are quite young. At most, you're just an advanced apothecary, right? Don't be so arrogant. This will be beneficial to you in the future. Faced with these self-righteous exclamations, Su Luo felt like crying and laughing. Advanced apothecary? She had long moved past that. However, when Su Luo saw Li Luoming's smug appearance, as if he were a peacock, an evil thought flashed through her heart. It wasn't like it was impossible for her to teach him a lesson. Furthermore, she couldn't refine the spirit-absorbing pills in her space because it required earth fire, which she didn't have inside it. Chapter 2280, Conflict 6. Instead of looking for another refining room, it would be better to just try it out in this pill refining tower's room. So, Su Luo looked at Li Luoming. You want to teach me? Li Luoming righteously nodded his head. Who knew that Su Luo would shake her head? No need. It's fine if we each take our own refining room. The people in the crowd all stared at Su Luo in disbelief. Such a good opportunity. She actually gave it up for nothing? Did she not know that Li Luoming was now an advanced apothecary? Li Luoming sneered. Fine. One refining room for each person. I want to see what this little girl is actually capable of. After saying that, Li Luoming personally went to select the medicinal materials for refining the spirit-absorbing pill, and then led the way down. The refining room was located underground. There was one refining room for each person. Su Luo and Li Luoming entered their rooms side by side. After entering, Su Luo felt a familiar earth fire. This earth fire was similar to what she felt when she entered the Fire Dragon Cave. Clearly, this was the same kind of earth fire. It was just that the fire in this place was more developed. The space inside was not too small and not too big, just right for Su Luo. A brownish-yellow alchemy furnace stood in front, and underneath it was a roaring earth fire. The earth fire's flames flickered vigorously, and the entire interior had a suffocating, stifling heat. However, Su Luo liked this kind of heat very much. Furthermore, the room's interior was neatly cleaned up, without a trace of dust and impurities, which reassured Su Luo a lot. By the time Su Luo reached the front of the pill refining furnace, her heart had gradually calmed down. What Li Luoming? What argument? That had all been washed out of her mind. At this moment, her head had forgotten about everything but the fragrance of medicinal herbs. Su Luo originally had 5 kinds of medicinal herbs, but now she had gotten 9 kinds, plus the spirit-absorbing stone, making a total of 15 kinds. 9 of them were auxiliary herbs, 5 of them were the main herbs, and the spirit-absorbing stone was the most important component. Su Luo skillfully moved to classify the 9 auxiliary medicinal herbs into different categories, and then screened and processed them according to their medicinal properties. In the end, Su Luo selected 3 medicinal herbs, meaning that Su Luo had a total of 3 chances. At this moment, Su Luo missed her space immensely because time was slowed down by 10 times, and the spirit energy in there was also more abundant. But who told the spirit-absorbing pill to require earth fire? Su Luo had no way to bring the earth fire to her space, so she had to give up on using it. Su Luo knew that if she were to use master pill refining techniques, then there was a 99% chance that the spirit-absorbing pill would be successful. But at this moment, Su Luo's heart was not satisfied with just master pill refining techniques. What if she used a grandmaster pill refining technique? Su Lu's mind suddenly jumped to such a daring idea. And then, this idea was like a maggot, tightly wrapping around her and refusing to let go. Su Luo felt extremely troubled. It hadn't been long since she had been promoted to a master apothecary, so her strength hadn't been fully consolidated yet. Would it be a little too soon to start refining at Grandmaster Pill now? Su Luo estimated that her current success rate was less than 1%. However, despite these thoughts, the idea of attempting a Grandmaster Pill refining techniques kept nagging at her. Su Luo looked at the herbs. Fortunately, there were 3 portions of them, so even if one was wasted, it wouldn't be too bad. So, Su Luo decided to refine 1 Master Spirit Absorbing Pill, and then take the remaining 2 to try her hand at refining Grandmaster Pills. The furnace in front of her, although not as good as the one given by her master that was in Su Luo's space, it was still a top-notch alchemy furnace. After all, this was an upstream mountain product, not just any ordinary product. Chapter 2281, Conflict 7. Su Luo took a deep breath. Her face tightened. After this, she carefully directed the flame of the fallen red lotus into the refining furnace. At the same time, Su Luo set the bottom of the refining furnace along with the earth fire. And so, 2 different flames, the fallen red lotus and the earth fire interwoven, as if they were fire and water. Because the minute the earth fire came out, the fallen red lotus would quickly devour it. And so the earth fire continuously surged over, and the fallen red lotus also swallowed more and more. Su Luo could feel that in the process of devouring, the fallen red lotus was also getting stronger. With these kinds of results, Su Luo was very satisfied. The fallen red lotus was her original flame, so of course the stronger it was the better. After putting the 9 auxiliary herbs in, Su Luo covered the top of the furnace and used her pale, jade-like slender hands to press against the wall of the pill furnace, manipulating the fallen red lotus to enter the inside of the furnace and releasing the medicinal contents and properties of the herbs. If someone entered at this time and saw that Su Luo actually used her original flame as the main flame to refine the medicinal herbs, they would definitely be astonished, because in their perception, the earth fire had to be the main flame, and the human body's original flame could only be used as a secondary flame. Yet Su Luo had turned all of this upside down. But how would they know that by using one's original flame to manipulate the refining furnace and manipulate the herbs, the success rate of the refining process would increase to an unbelievable level? The reason Su Luo's success rate was always so high was that she had always used her own original flame as the main flame. Because of this, if Su Luo and Li Luoming had equal strength, then Su Luo's refining of pills would have a success rate of 90%, but Li Luoming's would only have 50%, and this difference would continue so on and so forth. Under Su Luo's careful control, the temperature in the furnace was always maintained at a constant temperature, not too high and not too low, without even a slight fluctuation. Moreover, Su Luo communicated with the medicinal herbs through the fallen red lotus and could clearly grasp the extent of the activity released by the herbs, and so she was able to know exactly when to proceed to the next step. When Su Luo was refining the pills, she was fully concentrated and could not allow a single distraction to affect her. When the time came, she took the selected main one and sent it little by little into the medicine furnace. As the number of medicinal herbs increased, after their various medicinal properties were released, they were then combined and fused together one by one. This process was very critical and couldn't have the slightest slackening off of it all. On Su Luo's forehead, a thin layer of sweat gradually appeared. The thin sweat soon converged into beads and rolled down together. An hour later, Su Luo finally sent all the herbs into the pill refining furnace and fused them all into one. Su Luo nodded in satisfaction, and then slowly put the cut portion of the top-grade spirit-absorbing stone into the pill refining furnace. Chi! The moment the top-grade spirit-absorbing stone entered, a thick cloud of smoke instantly rushed up. But Su Luo had long been prepared for this and turned her head to avoid it, so as not to be injured by it. Inside the medicine cauldron, after the top-grade spirit-absorbing stone was thrown in, it instantly reacted with the rest of the medicinal properties, and the inherent aura of the top-grade spirit-absorbing stone stole away countless medicinal properties. This was like a beautiful man jumping into a swimming pool full of beautiful women, like too many monks but too little one. The snatching and grabbing were all extremely vicious. The reality was that Su Luo was carefully controlling the fallen red lotus, controlling every drop of spiritual energy released from the top-grade spirit-absorbing stone and fusing it with all of the medicinal properties under the high temperature. At this time, Su Luo's mind and heart were united, as if she were entering a state of meditative concentration. She seemingly mechanically controlled the fallen red lotus in her hands extremely steadily, without a trace of trembling or shaking. Chapter 2282. Result 1. Slowly, the spirit-absorbing stone was finally dissolved, its spiritual energy evenly mixing with the main and supplementary medicines, not a fraction more or less. Su Luo knew that the hardest part was over, but the remaining steps still required her utmost attention. Su Luo then took out many complicated and messy imprints and with extreme speed, pasted them on the medicinal furnace. It was so fast that bystanders would not see it clearly with their naked eyes and would only see the flashing afterimages of the many imprints. But once the last imprint was stuck on, Su Luo let out a long breath, because at this moment, the flames had almost left the medicinal furnace. The furnace walls, which were once scorching hot, had already cooled down. A hint of anticipation flashed across Su Luo's eyes while she opened the medicinal furnace. At that moment, a thick fragrance mixed with strong spiritual energy rushed towards her face. Su Luo took a deep breath and was refreshed by the strong fragrance. Su Luo took out a white porcelain bottle and waved her hand at those cute, round pellets of medicine. It was as if these master spirit absorption pills had a mind of their own, neatly lining up and entering the bottle by themselves. Clang, 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 a clear, pleasant sound was heard. The white porcelain bottle was soon full, but there was still one pill left over. So with a flick of her finger, the master spirit absorption pill appeared in Su Luo's hand. The spirit absorption pill had a strong fragrance and was white, round and plump, making it look very adorable. Su Luo threw it in her mouth and chewed it carefully. It had to be said that Su Luo was especially spoilt when it came to medicinal pills, so to her, eating this master spirit absorption pill was like eating candy. Crunch, crunch, Su Luo ate it with delight and smiled cheerily at the same time, very satisfied with the spirit absorption pill she refined. But now wasn't the time to be pleased with herself yet. Thus, Su Luo unhesitatingly threw the refined spirit absorption pills into her space and prepared to start refining the Grandmaster's spirit absorption pills. Although Su Luo was clear that with her current strength, she only had a 1% chance of successfully refining Grandmaster spirit absorption pills, she still had the urge to try it out. After all, she still had 2 sets of medicinal ingredients left. Soon, Su Luo started refining. Grandmaster techniques were much more complicated than master techniques. And as she released the medicinal properties of the herbs, Su Luo started sweating from the effort. Bang! Just when Su Luo added in the precious spirit-absorbing stone, the pills exploded. When she had just begun learning how to refine pills, explosions had been a common occurrence for Su Luo, so now she had a high resistance to these incidents. After she cleaned herself up, Su Luo looked at the third set of medicinal ingredients and chose the Grandmaster techniques again without hesitation. At this time, the people waiting outside were already on edge after waiting a total of 8 hours. It had not been easy for them to wait for so long just to watch the commotion unfold before them. Just then, the tightly shut door opened with a creak. Li Luoming has come out. Look, Li Luoming has come out. That's what I've said. Li Luoming is much stronger than that girl, and he came out first, so isn't it obvious? But those are spirit absorption pills, which are very difficult to refine. Looking at Li Luoming's beaming face, he should have succeeded, right? At this moment, Li Luoming had already walked out in triumph, and raising his eyes to look at Su Luo's closed door, he felt even more pleased with himself. Chapter 2283. Result 2. Li Luoming cheekily took out the medicinal pills he had refined and waved them in front of the crowd. You guys come have a look? Those round spirit absorption pills looked very amusing. But soon someone made a surprised expression. Hey, these aren't advanced pills. These are elite pills. Everyone was stunned. Before he entered, Li Luoming had been an advanced apothecary. But in a blink of an eye, he had been able to refine elite pills, which meant that he had advanced to an elite apothecary. At this moment, Li Luoming couldn't contain himself. If he had a tail, it would have been pointing straight up. He even put on airs as if he were the boss. Casting a side glance at Su Luo's door, his mouth turned up into a sneer. Well, it's nothing too major, just an elite apothecary. It wasn't very difficult to be an elite apothecary in the pill refining tower, but it was incredibly difficult to do so at such a young age. Among the younger generation in the pill refining tower, Li Luoming was the only one to advance to an elite apothecary, so it was no wonder he was this arrogant. Everyone stood around Li Luoming, singing praises, flattering him, and practically worshipping him to no end. Although Li Luoming kept a straight expression, his eyes could not hide the joy he had. At this moment, Su Luo's door at last opened slowly. When she came out, her face was pale and she was drenched in sweat. Anyone could tell that she was exhausted. Without a word, just by comparing the two, anyone with eyes could see that Su Luo had fallen behind Li Luoming by a large margin. When Li Manman saw Su Luo, she rushed over to support her, scared that she would collapse at any moment. How could Li Luoming not feel proud after seeing Su Luo like this? Girl, seeing you in such poor shape, the pills were surely a success, right? Let everyone take a look. Let us see how you've refined your pills. Su Luo briefly swept her eyes over him, then pulled on Li Manman, intending to walk away. But Li Luoming had caught this opportunity with great difficulty. How could he let Su Luo leave? Thus he reached out his hand, keeping Su Luo where she was. Hee, could it be that Miss Su has refined some peerless medicinal pills and can't bear to let us have a look? How could you be so stingy? Or are you looking down on us? Li Luoming said with a grin, but anyone could tell what his motive was. He knew full well that Su Luo couldn't take anything out and kept praising her. He intended to praise her highly only for her to fall to rock bottom. Su Luo looked over him with a mysterious smile. You really want to look? As long as you take them out, Li Luoming offhandedly replied. The corners of Su Luo's mouth rose a bit. Since you want to take a look, then I'll let you take a look. But you had best be mentally prepared, or you might be overstimulated, then die from the excitement. Poha ha ha. It was like Li Luoming had heard the funniest joke in his life, and laughed until he almost couldn't keep his back straight. Die from overstimulation? Ha ha. Su Luo shrugged. Since he insisted on seeking stimulation, then let's stimulate him a bit and show him that there would always be someone better than him at something. She showed a thin smile and slowly opened her hand. And so everybody saw in Luo's palm a small, cracked, yellowish-brown pill that still had traces of powder on it. This is the pill that you refined? Li Luoming took a deep breath and asked Su Luo seriously. Yup, dead serious, Su Luo nodded. Chapter 2284. Result 3. You think that this medicinal pill will overstimulate me, and I'll die on the spot? Li Luoming tensely eyed Su Luo. Su Luo blinked her clear eyes, as if to ask if that wasn't the case. Who would have thought that in the next moment, ha! Li Luoming laughed wildly with his hands on his hips. He was laughing so hard he was nearly pounding the floor in laughter. The people behind him followed along and also roared with laughter. With just this failed, half-baked product, you said I would be overstimulated? Li Luoming was laughing to tears. She was really laughing like mad. How could this girl be such a jokester? That's what I said. How could a little miss compare to Li Luoming? That's right, at the start I was really scared into thinking she was extremely capable, but who would have thought? Fatisk. Li Man was angered half to death, and she clenched her fist. All you old bastards with lousy judgment. Luo here is very capable. Li Man wholly and blindly believed in Su Luo. Li Luoming proudly took out his medicinal pill and waved it in front of Su Luo. Look, this is a real elite spirit-absorbing pill. What you have there is just a complete joke. Su Luo slowly swept her gaze over them, and then she waved them off with her hand. These people only gave her unnecessary anxiety. Let's go. Su Luo pulled on Li Man and left. Right now, resting was her priority. Su Luo had left calmly, but the remaining people weren't like Li Luoming. Seeing Su Luo leave, his heart swelled with pride, and he spat with a sneer. Daring to challenge Li Luoming, you sure have some guts. After saying his piece, Li Luoming left while basking in the abundantly envious stares everyone gave him. Although both people involved, Su Luo and Li Luoming, had left, the commotion didn't die down. The crowd of onlookers didn't disperse. Instead, they were all discussing what had happened. Some said that Su Luo being so pretentious at such a young age. While her first impression was not bad, her gold and jade exterior soon collapsed to reveal a rotting interior. Others said that Li Luoming was a leader of the younger generation, so bullying a little miss from the outside was like the strong bullying the weak. Hence, it didn't count as his victory. While they were discussing this spiritedly, the door to the medicinal pill room opened. Sixth Elder. Seeing the lean, white-haired old man, a few people greeted him respectfully. The fifth elder was the real authority of the pill refining tower, so they would see him around occasionally. But the sixth elder had single-mindedly immersed himself in medicinal research, secluding himself, and he was something of an elusive figure. Rarely would one even have a chance to see him. Furthermore, the sixth elder was also a reserved person, always keeping a stoic face. He was also stiff and severe. All of the apothecaries held him in great awe. Seeing this group of people gossiping, the sixth elder was about to raise his voice, but just then his nose twitched. It was too late to scold these people anyway, and the scent in the air caused a hint of amazement to flash across the sixth elder's eyes. There were people refining pills here earlier? The sixth elder icily asked. Indeed. Someone rattled. Just now Li Luoming and a little miss from the outside were refining medicine here. The two were competing. Li Luoming, you said? The sixth elder was shocked, his gaze dead fixed on the person speaking just now. As for the little miss from outside, she was immediately neglected. Why? The person whom the sixth elder was gazing at almost didn't even dare to breath and hurriedly asked everyone else. Right? It was Li Luoming just now, right? Chapter 2285. Result 4. It's Li Luoming. He is a disciple of the fifth elder. I could recognize him even if he turned to dust. Under the sixth elder's intense gaze, everyone nodded their heads and showed their agreement. The sixth elder frowned instead, with some surprise and disbelief in his eyes. He had previously heard Fifth Elder saying that Li Luoming was a gifted talent who had already refined a good batch of pills before he reached the age of 30. However, the Sixth Elder had never in the least expected that Li Luoming's talent would be this great. He had become a grandmaster at such a young age. Sixth Elder could not believe this, and so he suspiciously pushed the door open. But the Sixth Elder was stopped by everyone before he could open the door. Sixth Elder, it's not right. This is the room that the little girl previously used to refine the pill. Yes, I remember Li Luoming was on the right-hand side, not on the left. Sixth Elder, this is the room Li Luoming used. Everyone pointed at it to show the Sixth Elder. The Sixth Elder stared irritably. Stop nagging. This room refined nothing but elite pills. Do you think I'm too old and confused to even know this little? Is such a medicinal room worthy of my visit? What I want to see is this room. This one. Everyone was confused by Sixth Elder's scolding and didn't understand what he meant. The Sixth Elder gave the group of people a fierce glare, then pushed the door into the medicine room, where Su Luo was in earlier. Bang! The door closed heavily. It was the sound of the closing door that brought everyone back to their senses in an instant. Everyone looked at each other. One looked at the other looked back. Their eyes were full of questioning, but they couldn't think of an answer. The Sixth Elder pushed the door open and entered the room. He hurried to the medicine cauldron. At this time, the ground fire had been extinguished, but probably because the other party had left in a hurry, they had not disposed of the pill residue. The Sixth Elder examined the medicine dregs carefully. The more he studied it, the wider his eyes grew. This technique, this medication, and this flame, perfect, so perfect. This was definitely a genius apothecary. The Sixth Elder looked at the mess in the room in front of him, but it was as if the mess was his most beloved person, and he was suddenly lost in it. The Sixth Elder was shocked, standing there in a daze, trying to simulate the other party's pill refining techniques time and time again, but he still couldn't think them through. Of course, it couldn't be simulated, because Su Luo had the fallen red lotus in her hand, while the Sixth Elder only had spiritual fire. Therefore, no matter how much he tried, he wouldn't be able to simulate Su Luo's technique. Unknowingly, the Sixth Elder had been in the pill refining room for a whole day and night. By the time he came back to his senses, it was already the early morning of the next day. No, I have to dig out that genius and ask them to teach me. Thinking of this, the Sixth Elder pushed the door and came out. However, by the time the Sixth Elder came out, it was already empty outside. The few apothecaries who had been guarding outside had long since dispersed. Even if the Sixth Elder wanted to ask someone at this moment, he couldn't find anyone to do so. Those people had originally been watching for the excitement, but after being reprimanded by the Sixth Elder, they had all slipped away quietly, afraid of getting into trouble. Although the Sixth Elder was stunned for a while, he quickly came back to his senses. There would be a medicine conference at the pill refining tower in a short time. That expert would definitely come to participate, right? He would consult with that person when the time came. The Sixth Elder hadn't listened to the people's conversations seriously before. Had he listened to them carefully, he would have known what the onlookers were talking about was the little girl who had come from outside. Chapter 2286. Result 5. Li Manan helped Su Luo to return to Wuchen Mountain. Su Luo gave Li Manman 3 spirit absorption pills and said to her, 3 pills, divide their usage over 3 months. After taking them, your previous injuries will mostly be healed, and at the very least you will be able to be promoted by a level or 2. By then, you can refine the original spirit fire. Li Manman held the 3 spirit absorption pills with great care and went away happily. It was quite coincidental that Big Sister Wei and the group came back just at this time. Big Sister Wei was very excited when she saw Su Luo. She kept circling around Su Luo without speaking, simply staring at her. Su Luo smiled, pulled her to sit down, and asked, "Did you get anything good from going out with them?" She had just seen that Big Sister Wei's strength had been promoted again. She was now a 3-star saint rank. She couldn't help but be happy for her. Big Sister Wei glared at senior brother Luo Qing full of contempt and said, "Nothing good." Su Luo looked at senior brother Luo Qing. Senior brother Luo Qing smiled gently. Big Sister Wei's attack power is relatively strong. Senior brother Luo Qing looked embarrassed. Combining this with her previous experience fighting side by side with Big Sister Wei, Su Luo instantly understood. Only Su Luo could control the rampage of Big Sister Wei, so Su Luo smiled and said to her, "Forget it, let's go together another time." Big Sister Wei expressed her excitement about this decision, but then frowned. "What's wrong?" Su Luo asked. "I'm too weak," Big Sister Wei said angrily. Currently, Little Luoluo was a 2-star saint rank. She couldn't protect Little Luoluo anymore. Would Little Luoluo still want her? The more Big Sister Wei thought about it, the more panicked she became, and the more she pulled Su Luo's hand, squeezing it to the point of raw pain. Su Luo was naturally smart, and so she could guess most of what the problem was from Big Sister Wei's behavior. She smiled and patted Big Sister Wei on the shoulder, then poured out 3 round pills for her. "Take these, use these 3 pills for now, and try to increase your cultivation as much as you can." Big Sister Wei instantly remembered the time she was in the cave with Su Luo. At that time, Little Luoluo had also given her this pill, and her strength skyrocketed after eating. And so, Big Sister Wei gleefully accepted and couldn't wait to rush to her room to cultivate. At this time, Senior brother Luo Qing and everyone had envy in their eyes. They were not ignorant people. They recognized that this was a spirit absorption pill, and it was also a master spirit absorption pill, which was very rare. Even if you had points, you still couldn't buy this pill. It was definitely priceless, and Su Luo was really generous. She gave away all 3 pills at once. Senior brother Luo Qing and his companions looked at the pills, wanting them, but they didn't have any expectations. They prepared to quietly leave. "Wait!" Su Luo called out to them. Senior brother Luo Qing's footsteps trembled, and his heart suddenly moved. Could it be that she wanted to give them the medicine pills too? Even if there was 1 pill given to 3 people, they would already be thrilled. In an instant, Su Luo had already walked to the front of them. "Extend your hand out." Su Luo's voice was clear and cold. Senior brother Luo Qing and the rest were bewildered and obediently stretched out their hands. Eh? Su Luo held the white jade porcelain bottle and poured 3 pills into each hand, then said lightly, "Put them away. Quickly go back down and cultivate." She didn't know many people in the genius training camp. Although senior brother Luo Qing and his brothers were average in strength, they were superior in character. Hence Su Luo planned to treat them as her own people. Chapter 2287. Result 6. Of course, it's for you guys. I still have plenty anyway. Su Luo shook her porcelain bottle in front of them. In fact, Su Luo later gradually learned how stupid she had been when she was selling pills in Purgatory City. The master pills were pretty rare, and she had only sold them cheaply because she hadn't taken the matter seriously when using her abundant energy to produce them. Actually, her price at that time had already been increased tenfold, at which still completely sold out. Senior brother Luo Qing's team looked at each other with tears of gratitude flashing in their eyes. Tian Meng slapped Su Luo on her slender shoulder. This powerful slap almost pushed Su Luo to the ground. "Girl, that's great. In the future, I, Tian Meng, will do anything for you even if the sky is falling on my head." Although Su Yin did not have a strong presence and did not know how to express himself, at this time he desperately nodded at Su Luo, seriously and solemnly. This forbearing man was accustomed to silently remembering the kindness of others to him, and silently repaying them back when needed. Su Luo, this... Senior brother Luo Qing felt a lot of pressure. 3 master spirit absorption pills. If word got out about this, how shocking would it be to people? Spirit absorption pill was the most difficult to refine out of all medicines. The pills from Su Luo's bottle had probably already been refined for several years. Because in the eyes of senior brother Luo Qing, his impression was that a master apothecary could only refine 3 pills at most each time, and that the apothecary needed to rest for a long time after the refining was complete. Therefore, This reflected the unparalleled status and value of the pill. Who knew that Su Luo would simply wave her hand? Here they are. You can take them. Hurry up and improve your strength. There will be things for you to do for me in the future. Listening to Su Luo's tone and hearing that she still needed them, senior brother Luo Qing widened his eyebrows and smiled. One by one, they nodded solemnly towards Su Luo, then excitedly went down like a Mautu one. Su Luo looked at their backs and found them all very funny. What she gave out had only been a Master Spirit Absorption pill. In fact, she still held 3 Grandmaster Spirit Absorption pills in her hand. One was a semi-finished product, one was a defective product, and the last one was the real finished product, but the color was not up to the standard. In the refining room, when Su Luo had been refining the second herbal medicine, she had unfortunately blown up the pill. However, while refining the third one, her luck was still very good, and she had actually gotten a Grandmaster pill. Nonetheless, Su Luo didn't think that she had been promoted to a Grandmaster Apothecary yet. She had just barely touched the promotion threshold of the Grandmaster Apothecary. To pass through it, she still needed to be diligent in her practice. Moreover, to be promoted to a Grandmaster Apothecary, she needed 3 very precious medicinal materials. The first one was Ling Tree Water. The second one was 9 Stars Mingmu Grass. And the third one was 9 Yin and 9 Yang Fallen Cloud Flower. These 3 top-grade medicinal materials were necessary for refining the Grandmaster Promotion Pill. To be promoted to the Grandmaster Apothecary, Su Luo had to refine the Grandmaster Promotion Pill. Su Luo originally felt that being a Grandmaster Apothecary was still far away, and she didn't need to consider this Grandmaster Promotion Pill yet. But since she had accidentally refined the Spirit Absorption Pill yesterday, she now had in her heart this strong obsession to obtain it. Nangong Luoyuan had said that he would return to her when she was promoted to a Grandmaster Apothecary. Chapter 2288. Result 7. Su Luo had left the Grandmaster Spirit Absorption Pills for herself. Although they were imperfect, they were still twice effective as compared to the Master Pills. However, Su Luo only took 1 pill and kept the other 2. If she could, she would exchange those 2 for the herbs that she desperately needed. When Su Luo went to Luo Yichen to ask for advice with this problem, with a frown, he proceeded to think about it before pointing out a clear solution. Auction. Auction? Su Luo was surprised. There is even an auction here? Luo Yichen looked at Su Luo speechlessly for a moment. This place houses the greatest number of treasures in the continent, as well as the consumer group with the greatest purchasing power in the continent. How could there be no auction? Well, Su Luo thought about it, and it was indeed true. When will the auction be held? Su Luo felt that she didn't know enough about the genius training camp. The middle of every month? Luo Yichen thought about the date, then reminded her, it's tomorrow. The time was near. Su Luo nodded and was about to leave, but Luo Yichen shouted, wait. What? Su Luo stopped walking and turned her head, a bewildered look appearing on her face. Luo Yichen stood in front of the desk, holding a wolf's hair brush in his hand, writing with great vigor on the Chung Xiantang one. The afterglow outside the window landed on him, causing his figure to appear hazy and indistinct. Take care of yourself. Luo Yichen's attention seemed to be on the Chung Xiantang paper on the table, as he did not raise his head when he said this. Huh? Su Luo felt more and more confused. After a pause, Luo Yichen said, I am leaving soon. Huh? Su Luo was really surprised. She quickly ran to senior brother Luo, who was a few steps away from her, and pulled his sleeves. Where are you going? Senior brother Luo. Although Luo Yichen only took action once, his existence was a deterrent, and was Su Luo's strong backing. Thus, Su Luo was shocked when she heard that he was going to leave. Extraterritorial battlefield. Luo Yichen patted Su Luo on the back of her hand and put aside the wolf's hairbrush. Su Luo stared at him for a moment. Didn't you promise your master to protect me? Why are you leaving just like that? Are you not afraid of Fairy? Will you killing me? Luo Yichen rubbed Su Luo's head in slight exasperation. She's already lucky to not have died from the anger you've caused her. Where can she find the guts to kill you? Su Luo stuck out her tongue in response. Although she had pissed off Fairy Wu Yu enough, Fairy Wu Yu was still much stronger than her. You're really not worried about me, huh? Su Luo tilted her little face and looked at Luo Yichen with the sparkling eyes. Don't you have the 8th elder to protect you? It's great to have him as a bodyguard and as a treasury. It's pretty cool, eh? Luo Yichen poked Su Luo's forehead. Su Luo stuck out her tongue again. It's not easy to take an advantage of this rogue. Su Lu's murmur made Luo Yichen burst into laughter. Being left speechless, he patted Su Luo on the head. Wait for me to come back from the extraterritorial battlefield. Then, senior brother Luo, now you can tell me who your master is, right? Su Luo tilted her head with a curious face. Didn't he say before that he came to take care of her at the order of his master? Su Luo had always been curious about who his master was. Even after much thinking about it, she couldn't figure it out. No. Senior brother Luo ruthlessly rejected Su Luo. He then proceeded to kick Su Luo out. Chapter 2289, The Auction 1. As soon as she stepped into her room with her front foot, she felt her diamond token move. Su Luo took it out to take a look and was immediately dumbfounded. Looking at senior brother Luo's door, she was so moved that almost had an impulse to devote herself to him. Senior brother Luo was truly a tycoon. What a huge amount of points. Su Luo was still feeling distressed, thinking over how she could dig up some large points from the 8th elder, as the auction was to be tomorrow. An auction was a fight of wealth. Although the 8th elder listened to her, she could not constantly demand from him. If he really turned his back against her, they would perish together, and that would be a miserable outcome. Just before Su Luo could come up with an excuse, senior brother Luo had sent her a large sum of points. Well, I should say that it was borrowed. Su Luo thought I would definitely have to return it when the time comes. In reality, she still has 2 imperfect Grandmaster Spirit Absorption pills in her hand, which were worth tens of millions of gold, so she could hold out more or less. The next day, Su Luo took Li Man to the auction. The auction area was also in the upstream mountain, but it was very far from the residential area. It took 3 hours of flight for Su Luo and Li Man before they finally arrived. As expected of the auction house in the upstream mountain, one could feel the regal air of majesty from a long distance. As the auction was held on a fixed day of every month, it always gathered a large crowd every time. Su Luo and Li Man had deliberately arrived early, as Su Luo wanted to sell her spirit absorption pills here. In order to sell at a good price, Su Luo took out the most perfected pill. Su Luo and Li Man stood in front of the Black Cloud auction house. After explaining her intention, someone specially welcomed Su Luo and Li Man in. The auction house occupied a large area, almost as long as a whole street. After entering, they were greeted with a complicated lineup of pavilions, kiosks, small bridges, and flowing water. Led by the waiter, Su Luo and the others walked through the winding path and soon arrived at a lobby. The plaque hanging above the lobby read, "The Meeting Room." However, they did not allow Su Luo to enter the lobby. Instead, the waiter directly guided Su Luo to the small door on the edge of the lobby. Present here was a small meeting room. It was obvious that in the eyes of the waiter, Su Luo and Li Man were only qualified to come to this small meeting room. When Li Man looked at it, her face sunk. Obviously, she was very unhappy in her heart. Nevertheless, Su Luo remained calm, her blue eyes as tranquil as ever, while a slight smile hung from the corner of her mouth. It seemed that nothing, none, or any kind of treatment could make her emotions go up and down. The one who received Su Luo was an apothecary. A young female apothecary. She was dressed in a purple and red robe, her eyebrows in a cold and haughty posture. Seeing Su Luo coming in, a trace of jealousy flashed in her eyes. Su Luo's stunning appearance had caused her to be very much pressured and jealous. Already not in a good mood, it got worse after seeing Su Luo. Looking at the latter, she casually pointed at the chair beside her and signaled Su Luo to sit down. She carried a commanding gesture, a cold and arrogant look. Seeing the other party with that look, Li Man Man felt anger surge in her. What kind of people are they sending here to value a Grandmaster pill? This is a big deal of business. How can they have such poor manners? Just when Li Man Man wanted to jump up, Su Luo pulled her hand in time. Li Man Man could only roll her eyes at Su Luo, huff and puff, before turning her head away. Su Luo was about to explain her intention to the cold female apothecary. But before she could open her mouth, the other party glanced at Su Luo, casually waved her hand, and said with impatience, "Since I told you to wait. That you're tuning into the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.